Andy Howe, welcome to the Vermillion Unplugged. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thanks.
This is great, and we were just talking about this. We're just right before, because I had a lot of people recommend you. They're like, hey, you should get the sheriff, you should get Andy, you should get this. I'm like, okay, let's see if he answers. And yeah, I messaged you, and you answered back, and I'm like, all right, let's get this going. And I know this morning for me was stressful. I'm like, oh man, I gotta get this going. I'm gonna be late. If I'm late, he's gonna probably put me in jail or something. But nah. But let's get into it. So, what do you do?
Okay, I'm the Clay County Sheriff here in Clay County. I've been sheriff now for something about 22 years, and I've been with the sheriff's office for about 15 years prior to that. So, been kind of working there for quite a while now. Been pretty much a lifelong resident here in Vermillion. I live north of town now with Wakanda address, but I've been a Vermillion resident since I was about 10 years old.
Have you always wanted to be in law or in the police
No, I wouldn't say always. It's always been something I was interested in. I was attending USD after I got out of the Marine Corps, and my major was political science, and I wasn't thinking law enforcement at that time, although I did take some criminal justice classes. And I was encouraged by the former chief deputy, he's retired now, Les Kephart. He encouraged me to apply as a jailer. And it was a great college job. You work nights. It was quiet, except for when, there was an arrest made or something. But back in those days, things were much quieter than they are now. And you had a lot of time to do your homework on those night shifts. So it was a great college job. There was one semester every jailer made the dean's list, because it was just a great college job, great place to start. So I did that for a few years. About the time I graduated from college, they created a deputy sheriff position. At that time, there were only 2 deputies. They added a third. And then that same chief deputy encouraged me to apply for that. And so instead of moving on, I stayed and applied for that and got that. And it just kind of the interest developed, and I just kind of stayed where I was and kind of moved up through the positions and enjoyed doing it every day. It's always something new. It hasn't tired me out yet.
That's a very similar story with when I did it with Crystal Brady, who is the chief of Vermillion Police. She said she would, when I asked her, hey, was that your plan? She said no. She wanted to. I think same thing. She was studying at USD, if I remember. So I apologize, Crystal, but I think she was doing like biology. And then someone said, hey, we got, I think, a position at the jailers, the department. And then she did it, and then she did some police ride, and then they offered her a job, and she's through the ranks. And yeah, she didn't expect
I didn't know what her major was. I just always presumed it was criminal justice. People think my major was criminal justice as well.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know she was a biology major. But yeah, I remember when she started, she started out as a jailer, became a dispatcher, then an officer, then an investigator, and now the police chief.
That's cool. Is there a big difference between the police department, like the Vermillion one, versus doing stuff for Clay County?
There are quite a few differences, but a lot the same. The police work is the same. We're all cops. We're all police officers. We all train, to enforce the law. We use the same tactics. We train together here. So we do things the same way, and we can count on each other to how you might respond to a situation. So when we do firearms training, a lot of our classroom trainings together, and because we assist the Vermillion Police in town with a response to incidences. They will also respond to assist us out in the country, especially if it's nearby, if we request it, and so that's always great to have that kind of partnership. But beyond police work that you think of as traffic stops, responding to incidents, medical calls, and things like that they all do, we all do that too. In addition to that, we have we're responsible for the courts, security, transporting prisoners to court. I'm responsible for the jail, and so we keep the jail. We maintain custody of inmates. Right now, our jail is in kind of in transition. I'm sure we'll get into that shortly, but we serve civil process. Whenever someone brings an action in front of the court, we'll generally serve that notice, summons, complaints, small claims notices. We collect judgments for people. A lot of people don't realize, think of law enforcement doing that, but the county sheriff is responsible. If somebody gets a judgment ordered by the court, then we have to collect that from their assets. We transport prisoners if they're arrested in another jurisdiction, and then we bring them back here. There's probably quite a few things I'm forgetting. There's just such a variety of things that the sheriffs and deputies do in addition to the police work. At the same time, it might seem like we do less. For example, we have a shared database with the Vermillion Police, and all of our reports are in the list together, and they might have, maybe we might have 1 or 2 to their 10, but it isn't just that. So we're busy doing other things and trying to resolve arrest warrants and those civil process. Besides, we contract in Wakanda and Irene as the city police in those cities. They don't have their own police, so we contract with them, and so we provide that law enforcement presence there. We do the traffic enforcement and respond to calls there. Now we do that anyway since they're in Clay County, but we give them set number of hours by contract where we'll patrol the town and be available and kind of handle the issues that they have come up.
Are the issues issues and incidents, are they similar or different between, like, for example, Vermillion versus the whole county or in the countryside?
Somewhat. Excuse me. We respond to a medical call all the same. Heart attack's a heart attack. If somebody falls and gets injured, we're going to respond to that with EMS, same as police do. Domestic violence issues are the same. Although when they're rural, your response time's slower, your backup's farther away. Deputies tend to learn to do things alone, and just because they have to, we try to get assistance to every call so nobody has to do things alone. But they do find themselves alone a lot more than you do in town. The highway patrol helps us when they can, but we also do things that they don't do in town, like drainage complaints or some trespassing things or cattle on the road or cattle in someone else's pasture and things like that you just don't have in town. And it sometimes seems surprising when you might hear about like a complaint about somebody's chickens and something in town. But these days, having chickens in town has kind of become a real thing too. So they might deal with that here too.
What are those, throughout your years, what are the most common incidents that you've seen?
Well, I'd probably say most common is going to be traffic sort of complaints. If you look at the kind of reports that we see and what kind of incident code that might have, it's going to be like a traffic incident, which could be a traffic stop or traffic complaint, crashes. We in the country, we do a lot of deer crashes. People hit deer a couple a week. It's pretty common. When we tell people watch out for deer, we mean it. There are deer out there, and we deal with that quite a bit. And that's probably the most common kind of thing. We do have drug issues. Primarily that happens in town. We tend to see more of that in town. We do have it in the country. Some of our rural residents or in our small towns, Wakanda and Irene, Burbank, Meckling, some of those have that. Most of it seems to be where there's more population. We deal with everything everybody else deals with, probably just maybe less of it or less frequency. But I think it was one time it was asked of me previously about, our most common incidents, and I found that traffic related stuff was most common, and that's what people call in and complain about.
Okay.
And so you have what you observe, and then you have what people report to you, and then and that's what people pick up the phone and complain about: somebody driving too fast or something like that.
Okay.
Swerving.
All right, now let's get into that jail thing, because I think because I've heard about it. Everyone's talking about the jail. I still want to say I'm more newish. I've only been here, actually in August, I'm about to hit 4 years with me and my family. And we heard about the jail. So I just don't know. The jail right now is the one at the, past downtown, right?
Yeah. at the courthouse.
Yeah, so that's the jail.
Yep.
Okay, so because everyone kept saying, "Hey, you should go in there. It's like kind of small." I've been there once, and I was like, "Oh, so it is small."
Yeah, yeah. It's old. We have a jail that was built with the courthouse in 1912, and so it's got steel bars, gray steel bars, good old fashioned, like you'd see on TV. It's got more modern toilets. It isn't completely a dungeon, but it's old. There are people who have been in there that always say down in the basement, and they think it's in the basement of the courthouse, even though they've been in it, because the windows are high, and so they feel like they're in the basement. But it's ground floor of the courthouse. If people are familiar with the Clay County Courthouse, the mainly the west end of the first floor is the jail after the men's bathroom, but actually it's from the elevator. The elevator west is the jail. You just don't see it. It's a blank wall from the inside, from the public hallway. You access the jail though through our business entrance, which is on the public safety center side. And so most of the jail, it was built as a what was it? I think it was about an 18-bed jail when it was built. And then they put the elevator in the courthouse, and they lost 4 beds, and it took it down to a 14-bed jail because the elevator shaft consumed some of that area. So we had a 14-bed jail when I started working there, and it had been that way for quite a while. And then in 88, 89, they did an addition to the courthouse called the Public Safety Center, which houses the sheriff's office, police department, and our dispatch. And that added a few more beds. So we actually increased, and now we have a 20-bed jail. But it's antiquated. It's not set up the way jails operate now. You have just some cells over here and some cells over there, and the jailer has to move around quite a bit to monitor inmates and move inmates through their own space. It's just not right. It's not how jails operate anymore. And so then I think that it's been about as long as I've been sheriff, we've been talking about a need for new jails, not just me, but quite a few people. Then in the about 2016, we started really having serious conversations. We did a space needs study, discussing the entire county, not just the jail. Matter of fact, the study started when we were talking about how to better secure the courthouse and protect the courthouse employees and the people in the courthouse because of the how outdated the courthouse was in the way that, we don't have teller windows, we don't have security between staff and people in there. And so this conversation started, and we brought in an architect to actually study that. How might we better secure the courthouse? And he said, yeah, you've got some issues with that, but boy, that jail. You guys have got an old jail. That something's got to happen with that jail. You don't operate jails like that anymore. And so that really steered that conversation. And eventually we had a study committee that recommended that we actually build a new courthouse and jail and police and sheriff. Then that went to a bond vote. There were several people in the community were very adamantly opposed to moving out of the existing courthouse. And so that bond failed. There just really wasn't the support for a tax increase for that when there were so many people opposed to it. So we regrouped and then actually started talking about just the jail and the police and sheriff, because there really wasn't any argument opposing that significantly anyway. There are people that will always oppose a tax increase, so you can count on that. But there wasn't any real opposition to it. It was, I think, fairly well understood that the county needed to do better in the way we were operating our jail. It's just too old. It wasn't safe. It wasn't safe for staff or inmates the way that it was laid out. And there was a space issue in the courthouse. I think that wasn't even the opponents to moving out of the courthouse didn't deny there was space issues in some of the offices. So that bond issue passed. We had a 60% majority for that to build a new jail and law enforcement center. So we started that construction last, I believe it was October. October 3rd was groundbreaking. And that is near Polaris on 1250 Stanford Street, just north of Pump and Pack near the bypass. And so that project's been underway now, just a little over 6 months now. We hit 180 days. The project's been slowed quite a bit by rain. It just rains and rains and rains this year. Wouldn't you know, we'd have a wet year on our construction.
What are the chances?
Yeah. And so, but that project's moving along. So we're going to have a larger jail that will house 54 inmates. We have a pre-planned an addition for, future generations. This jail is going to handle Clay County's needs for a long time. I'm confident of that. But when the day comes that it doesn't, we've already got a plan and the space for it, so they don't have to go out and build a new law enforcement center in jail. They can add on to this one when the need comes, if the need comes. It's already set, and so it'll be a modern jail. It'll be safer. It'll be easier to manage for the staff. It'll have a kitchen, so we don't have to bring in meals from the grocery store or the pizza ranch like we do now. And we'll have new offices for the police and sheriff, emergency management, dispatch. It'll be more modern, more efficient than what we have now. And then when we vacate the public safety center that we've been in since 89, then the courthouse offices can expand into that and ease some of that crowding. So it should ease the burden on that old courthouse for a while now too. So it should kind of meet a lot of needs even there.
Okay. No, that's cool. That's great. With that new jail now, I know you explained those differences between the old one, but what are those like for you? What are those big pros that you're going to have for that new jail?
Well, we'll have the ability to segregate or classify inmates better. Even it isn't really a matter of number of cells or number of beds for the classification. It's actual areas where they can be housed together. So we have, if you kind of picture a clock situation where the jailers have more, pretty much full-time direct supervision. They'll sit at a control station central among spokes of a wheel around them would be a good way to say it, of the housing units. We call them pods. And there might be anywhere from 4 to 8 inmates in a pod, depending on the sizes. And those inmates would be the kind of people that could be put in together. They could be, of course, male-female separation. We have, sometimes you have violent, non-violent offenders convicted or pre-trial. Sometimes you have someone that's just not the kind of person you can put in with somebody else. They're just not, we can't have people assaulting each other. We can't have people causing issues with each other, because the jail operates best when everybody's getting along. Because, obviously our staff are outnumbered by the inmates at all times. And so that we need the inmates to be compliant. And typically, even though they seem to always be looking for some way to find some rule to break, for the most part, they get along just fine. We have our procedures, we have our rules, and they follow them. When some don't, then we need to be able to move them somewhere else. Well, in our current jail, once we do that, we sometimes take too many beds out of commission. We can't classify people in with those other folks. So in this one, we have the ability to, even if we became suddenly predominantly female, we could actually reassign pods to female housing from male, and still be able to classify that. There are just, in a sense, almost dozens of different potential classifications of inmates. And we obviously can't always accommodate all of them, but we can accommodate most, and then use nearby jails for some of them other situations. Right now, we just plain can't separate people well, other than almost by gender alone. And right now we don't have any holding for those short-term people. Most of our people coming to the jail leave again within the day, and most of them within hours or minutes even. They get booked in, and then they're released on personal recognizance bond, or there may be a cash bond is posted, and they're back out. And those people don't need to get classified into your housing. But we don't have anywhere in our current jail to put them, so we're just reassigning cells for a short-term housing that we really could use for somebody that needs to be separated or Maybe a work release. A work release inmate doesn't get put in with people that stay there because it just opens that person up to pressure to try to bring in contraband, and so sooner or later that pressure can be great, and then we have an issue with introduction of contraband. So we have to separate work release inmates, and so this new jail is going to have that sort of ability to give us a lot of flexibility with how we classify inmates and keep everybody safe, keep everybody separate when they need to be. It also gives us, we have essentially a maximum security situation where there's only one person in the cell, up to we have dorm sort of pods where it's maybe 8 people in a cell. These are the people that get along. And there's a little more comfort involved. A bed's a bed and a bench is a bench, but it isn't comfortable that way. But they aren't locked in cells at night where the other people would be. And I think that's going to be work for most of the inmates we have. So gives us a couple of options there.
What's the main difference between a jail and a prison?
Well, really not a lot other than the duration of time. Prison is people that are sentenced for felony charges to prison. All of those people were in jail until they were sentenced. So there's a notion that, well, the bad guys are in prison, but the lesser bad guys are in the jail. And that's just not true, because everybody that was in prison served their pretrial time in the county jail. They were held there in the jail until they went to prison. So, and that's actually when they're probably more volatile, more have more anxiety about what's going to happen in their lives than the people in prison, where now they're settled in and they might have a job and they might have things that they can do to keep themselves busy. Where in jail, it's generally just a matter of sit and wait and find out what's going to happen with you. The average length of stay in our jail is about 7.25 days. And that's the average. And that's even taken away those people that are leaving within the day. People can only be sentenced to the county jail for up to a year. Most of our sentences tend to be maybe 30 or 90 days. Sometimes you'll see a 180-day sentence. But truthfully, most of our inmates sit their jail time pre-trial. Essentially, they're waiting. And then once they resolve their charges, they get sentenced to time served, and then they get out. So even though they sat here pre-trial the whole time as an unconvicted inmate or pre-sentence, they essentially sat their sentence while they're doing that, and then they get back out. So we do have people that are here with us a long time. We get to know them, but some of those can't receive trustee status where we'll let them out and mop floors and things because they're not sentenced. But then they get out and they get their sentence is applied to the time that they sat in awaiting trial. So it's just kind of there. It's just constant motion of people coming and going and coming and going. And we do see people that are repeat offenders that come and go frequently, the same person. And the jailers get to know those folks as well. Right now we have our jail is, because it's quite common knowledge that it's an old, antiquated jail, that we've really exposed these deficiencies. And with that in mind, we determined a few years ago to convert our function as a holdover site. So right now we only receive inmates at our jail. We receive all of the arrestees from Clay County and Turner County, and then we when they're classified as going to be staying longer than 3 days, we'll hold up to 72 hours in our facility. Then we move them to another jail. And so our jail administrator spends a good amount of time on the phone, lining up beds and lining up transports. And our staff have been reassigned to transport duties in addition to monitoring the inmates. And then we maintain a minimum staffing in the facility. And then others are transporting inmates to Union County or Yankton County, Minnehaha County, sometimes Brookings or Davison County. And then the same with Turner County. We'll hold their inmates up to 3 days. We find that 3 days, a lot of the things that we can't offer the inmates, programs, rec, visitation and things like that, don't really come into play in those first few days anyway. They're often just waiting for bond. And so we feel like we're not really depriving people of rights that we would otherwise give them in those 3 days. So then we move them out. So there's a lot of movement in our jail, even as small as it is. There's just inmates coming and going all the time, but there's always somebody in there. We have work release inmates. Work release, we don't move out because they leave every day anyway. They get plenty of daylight, and rec isn't really an issue. Work release inmates wouldn't go to rec anyway if we had it, and so we have work release inmates in there. We have some people that are just in there for weekend sentences, or people just waiting for bond. Turns out they don't post bond, and we move them.
What would the process be then? Like, I want to give a scenario, and I'm not doing this in case I do something bad, but like if, for example, something simple, like I was caught stealing for some reason, and then you guys came and got me. But like, what's the process? Like, what would happen to me, or how does that work?
Well,
or does that always depend?
Depending on the level of the offense, generally the arresting officer will establish probable cause. They need probable cause to show that there was a crime committed and that you were the one that committed the crime. And the probable cause means like a reasonable person would agree that was the case. It isn't beyond a reasonable doubt. As you probably heard these kind of things. To get a conviction, you need beyond a reasonable doubt. And obviously we want to establish that, but probable cause is just where a reasonable person would agree with you that there was a crime and that you or the person arrested was the person that committed the crime. So once that was established, then they would prepare an affidavit and bring the person to the jail, and then they prepare an affidavit that goes to the court, establishing probable cause. While that's all taking place, the jail receives the inmate. They'll do fingerprints, photos, mugshot, and then gather, height, weight, address, next again, standard kind of information that we kind of need to have. And then based on the charge, then there would be a bond set. And we've kind of got that scheduled. If certain offenses, if it's a local person, employed, it's a low-level crime, they're not a flight risk, it's just a standard personal recognizance bond. In other words, we'll just set a court date, have you sign a promise to appear, and tell you to come back for court. And then if it's maybe somebody from somewhere else, somebody we don't know, and it doesn't matter, do we know? It's like, is that person known in the area? We don't know everybody that comes in. But it's a matter of, is that person known to the area? Is that person, for any reason, a flight risk or concern that person might not come back? Because bringing people back from another state's difficult. And so then there might be a cash bond. So if they're not a local person, they might have a cash bond they'd have to post to get back out of jail. And then we set a court date. If it's after 11 p.m., and it's not a personal recognizance situation, that cash bond wouldn't be set until the next morning. And so, or if it's a domestic violence sort of thing, then there's always conditions set when with a domestic violence arrest. And so we have to wait until the judge is available, which we don't call judges after 11. And so sometimes people will wait in jail for several hours. Like I said, most people are out within 24. And it's just pretty common. Most arrestees are, and if that's a personal recognizance bond, they're often out in 15 minutes to a half an hour, assuming the jailers are available to do the bookings. And then so that's how most of it looks on that first day or so. If they don't post bond, or if they're just some reason that they're not released, then they will just stay with us. We'll move them to another county within the first few days, and they'll stay there. We'd bring them back for all their court appearances, and till they eventually go in front of the judge and resolve the situation through trial or plea agreement or something like that.
What if they try to escape? Like, they don't go? Is that when you guys go after them?
When they don't come to court, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
They leave the state.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Then we get a warrant, and most of those people haven't left the state. A lot of the people that we have out of state warrants for are people that got a traffic ticket and ignored it. Because they never get held on a class 2 misdemeanor or traffic violation. They get a ticket and they leave. And so really most of the warrants we have in the neighborhood of about 1,000 active warrants, give or take, and that might fluctuate by a few hundred a year up or down, but most of those are either traffic tickets that were ignored, or fines that weren't paid, And then you have the people that fail to appear for court appearance. And those are your fugitives. I mean, officially classified that way. And they, most of those folks are found in the state. Eventually they encounter law enforcement in the state. We run to Sioux Falls, Yankton, there's cities around us, and bring these folks back. And those ones, then they tend to sit right there in the jail until their charge is resolved, because they were already released once on PR and they didn't come to court. So now they have to post cash if they want to get out, and they don't. And so they sit. And then those are those people, I say, by the time they resolve the case, they might have 90 days in jail already. And maybe they wouldn't even got that much if they would have resolved it earlier.
Don't skip court.
Yeah. It's just, it's really, in a lot of cases, it's pretty easy to stay out of jail. Just do what you're supposed to do, just come to court. And, do follow the rules. Sometimes some offenders will tell their probation officers, it's like, it's impossible. These things you're asking me to do. It's like, no, these things are what everybody else already does. Don't do drugs. Don't go to work and take care of your family. These are the things that they're asked to do. They're not impossible things, but we deal with a lot.
So what do you think? Like, I guess it depends. I guess each person is different, but what causes a person to do, I don't want to say, I gotta be careful with the words, but what causes a person to do like a crime or something?
Well,
it's more complicated.
It's complicated, but really at the end of the day, in a lot of cases, in most cases, when we deal with crimes, it's drug related. It's addiction, the behavior issues. There's generally some connection to drug abuse or alcohol related to almost every crime we encounter. Meth is prevalent in the United States, and your meth users need to feed that habit. They commit crimes to get the drugs. They commit crimes because they're under the influence of it. And I think that it all comes back to that. When I was a college student, we mentioned earlier, I was a jailer while I was in college, and we actually, dating myself a bit here, I've been around a while. We didn't have computers when we started. I remember when we got a computer, and after we'd had data in there for a while, I actually went and I kind of reviewed data, and this was back in the old DOS days when, it took a while to pull up some of the searches, but I found that every single arrest made in that year, just looking at one particular year, there was either alcohol involved at the time of the arrest or when the crime was committed. Every single one. And so, there were domestic violence issues, of course, DWIs. And now that was back before meth. And now I'd say it's almost flipped. It's just almost always meth. And in Vermillion, we do have a lot of alcohol-related incidents. And people talk about college students, and the college students and their abuse of alcohol does create a lot of work for the Vermillion Police Department, and that does create a lot of bookings. That doesn't fill up our jail. Our jail's not full of college students. Okay. The college students are those that come and they go. They might have a DWI or an underage consumption where they show a fake ID. We get a lot of those arrests in Vermillion for the fake IDs. I tell the kids, it's bad enough that you have it. Don't show it to the cop. Admit that you have it, but don't try to portray yourself as that person. There's a difference between possessing the fake ID and using it to try to fool the law enforcement officer. There's two different crimes involved there. One of them's worse than the other. So those people, though, they're in and they're out. They never stay more than 10, 15 minutes, and they're out. And so most of our alcohol-related offenses are those people that come and they go, they resolve their issues, it's taken care of and done. The people that are using meth, that are creating most of the work for law enforcement, court services, the mental health professionals, it's a bit more complicated. It's just not in and out, and because that's where we're seeing the same people over and over and over. And it's complicated, and there's not an easy answer for it.
And then another thing too, and I think I didn't talk with John Cole about it, because he was an officer. I talked with Crystal about the misconceptions with law enforcement, because I guess it depends what area. I know because I'm from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I guess depending, where it is. I think if I remember, we were shown like, hey, just like you were saying, just don't, follow the rules. But also, hey, the cop isn't like really your friend, but just same thing, just don't do anything bad. But meeting with all of you guys, you guys seem nice, nice and fine.
Yep.
But do you think nowadays is there that, I don't know, maybe depending on the area, that disconnection or with civilians? Because I don't know, maybe it just depends on the area. Because you guys are trying to, you guys are doing your job, follow the rules. You don't want to. I'm guessing you guys aren't trying to arrest everyone.
No,
nothing like that.
we want people to. We want to hold people accountable. We want people to hold themselves accountable. We want people to follow the rules and be good neighbors. And simple as that almost. Sometimes there's an idea, well, why are you so difficult toward the people that we're arresting? Well, I'm serving the people we're not arresting. The good people that are not out there committing crimes, not out there damaging property. They're the ones having their property damaged. We need to take care of those folks. And sometimes the only way we can do that is to do what those people can't do, and that's to take that other person into custody. We have that authority to take people into custody, and we can't have people trying to solve all their own problems that way. That's Old West, gunfights in the streets sort of things. We can't have people doing their own police work, and so that means we have to do it for them. So I don't know what to call them, the offender. The offender might be thinking we're just out to get them. We're just out to make their lives miserable. No, we'd really like you to stop doing those things, but we're also here to take care of those other people, the innocent folks and the victims and the law-abiding citizens who are doing it right. They're putting license plates on their vehicles and paying to renew them properly. That why is it fair to require some people to do that and not hold other people accountable for not doing it? And that's a simple offense, but you take that to any other offense that you name. Is there are people out there following the law, they're paying their taxes, they're not doing meth, and they're taking care of their kids, and then they have their property damaged or their property stolen by somebody who isn't following the rules. So we're just not out to harm or to look to make life difficult for that person that's doing the bad thing. It's like we're trying to hold them accountable because other people aren't doing that, and we need to serve those folks as well. But at the same time, now that we're in that person's life and now we're connected with that person that's the offender, we want them to stop doing that. That's all we want. We're not looking for people to pick on. We're not looking for people to just make miserable or anything. We just want them to behave themselves and to be good neighbors and be good members of the community. And so we do a lot of stuff prior to that arrest. You hear of reactive and proactive policing. And I remember when I first started, the difference was kind of thought, well, do you just respond to the incident or do you go out and look for the incident? But I think proactive goes way before that. Long before going out and look for the incident, we want to prevent the incident. So we've been very proactive in having school resource officers in the school. And back when I became sheriff, we first put an officer in the school full time here in Vermillion. And I actually got a grant to add a deputy to do that full time. And the notion was that we want these kids to see law enforcement officers as not some sort of bully that's looking to wreck their day or take daddy away or something like that, is somebody that they can come and talk to when they have a problem. And they do that. They do it all the time now. Our school resource officers are there in the schools, and the kids approach them. They talk the kids through, hey, I got a ticket. Now what do I do? How do I resolve this? And they even will go meet with them in their physics classes, talk about the dynamics of crash investigations and things like that. And just let them know there's a lot more involved than just arresting bad guys. And I think we've had a lot of success with that. For one, if nothing else, we know the kids know the officers. We like to have the school resource officer coordinate and put other officers together with kids as much as we can. So the Vermillion Police does bike rodeo every year, and that kind of puts kids together. We do DARE. drug abuse resistance education. We do that in 5th and 6th grades, and that's several officers take turns with the kids and run through that program, so they get to know officers and maybe they say, well, all the kids that are abusing these drugs today took DARE, so it doesn't work. But then maybe there are kids that it did work with, so that makes it worthwhile. But if nothing else, that they've interacted with law enforcement officers as they were growing up and not just when they become an adult, because there are kids out there that are in their experience and in their lives, law enforcement is something to avoid, to stay away from, and to distrust. And we don't see it that way. We want to work with the kids. We want to work with the people who are victimized. And some of those people that are victimized aren't necessarily just the people that go to work every day, pay their taxes and educate their kids and are essentially doing everything right and by the rules. If some of these folks are addicted to drugs or have addiction as a big part of their lives, whether it's them or their families, and they are often victims too. They become victimized by the people they associate with. And so sometimes we're dealing with somebody who's a victim, and tomorrow they're an offender, and the next day they're a victim, and their lives are kind of in turmoil all the time that way. And you can't arrest people and make that just stop. It's just not so simple as just using arrest as the only tool to fix it. So I think that's the way we see it here, is we're all part of the solution. It's just not as easy as just being the bully cop and, the thumping people on the head like you saw in the old movies or whatever.
Yeah, I know it's way more complicated than it seems. And speaking of that too, because you mentioned that you enjoy the job. What's the hardest thing about being a cop or a sheriff that people don't know about?
Oh, well, hardest, I don't know. I could probably name off hard things. I don't know if I can really categorize them to say which is the hardest, because that answer might be different day to day.
Or those misconceptions.
Dealing with the death and the dying and the trauma that we see people go through, and trying to help people and then help our own people. Our officers have to deal with that stuff, and a lot of people might only deal with that once in their life, and we might deal with it 10 times in a year. And a lot of people never pick up the phone and call the police ever in their life. And when they do, it's a big deal to them. And well, it's just every day for us. And sometimes we have to remember that, it's just every day for us. I have a patrol car in front of my house every day, but other people see a patrol car in front of their house and it's a big thing. And to us, it's not. Sometimes people will ask, what were all the sirens about? And we said, nothing. It was, and maybe it was a false alarm or something, or maybe it was just really a minor thing to us, and it's a big deal to the people involved, and it's kind of easy to forget that when it's become so common. But then we have to make sure we're taking care of our folks that are carrying these burdens around. But when you see the regular citizens dealing with those sorts of things, and you want to help, and sometimes you feel pretty powerless to do that, other than just be comforting to them, and that can be difficult. Of course, major case investigations can be difficult, can be hard, but they're challenging, and I think that's what a lot of officers are kind of ready to do and want to do. So some of the things that we say are hard, that's why we're doing them. We're here to do those hard things, to do go into these situations that just not anybody can go in and do. We're given extra training to do them. We get extra tools, equipment, and authority. And that's usually the bigger deal, is that getting the authority granted by the statute to go and enter people's homes, because we have an order or a need to do that, or to deprive people of their liberty. We have that authority that's granted to us. And that's probably the biggest tool we have. It's not really so much even the training. We just need the training to be able to manage that authority, to do it right. And so when we say hard things, some of those hard things are hard work, but that doesn't mean we hate doing it.
Yeah.
And so I think the things that we'd probably would say the hardest is just kind of encountering other people's trauma and having to manage that and try to help and do the best you can. And the thing is years down the road, it's those things that people appreciate more later. And I still have people come up to me now from talk about something that happened to them decades ago that still made an impact that they remember. And I remember them too, but I've had a lot of them. Well, it was that once for that person, maybe it's 50 times for me, and or so. But I can still remember those. I mean, those ones do make an impact.
Okay, I imagine it's a very stressful, tough job, and I really a lot of people. I think that's what I see it, because it's man, I can't imagine, and I can't even complain because I work in an office. So I don't know how it is. But before we run out of time, is there any last things or last words you want to give out? Because I do want to give a shout out to you guys with all the stuff you guys do, keeping everything safe. Yeah, I'm grateful for that stuff you guys do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have any last words I would say. I mean, just it's good to talk to folks. It's one thing that I do differently. You mentioned being in an office, is that as time's gone by for me, I really miss the days when I was a patrol deputy and I was out in my uniform with my duty belt and responding to incidences and helping people. And I like when that opportunity comes up for me now, because now I'm the sheriff and I've got a bigger crew, a bigger staff than my old boss did. And they're trained to go out and do their job. And my job is to make sure that they're trained, equipped, paid, and ready and capable of going out and doing their job. And so that's me doing my job. And so sometimes I enjoy the opportunity to get out there and help them. But for the most part, I spend a lot of my time doing administrative tasks. And so the opportunity like this to visit with people I enjoy. I like the opportunity to interact with people that aren't upset with something, upset about something. And so it's, I mean, the folks that are out there, these officers you mentioned, in other communities where maybe they're not perceived to be as community oriented, and that might be a misperception. And I can't really speak to what officers somewhere else do that I don't know, but making that people have a good perception of you is important, because we always find the perception is all but as important as reality. If people don't think that you're doing it right, well, you're doing something wrong then. We need to make sure that people understand what we do and why we do it. It's just it's just important that we're communicating with our community, and I think we try really hard here in Vermillion to do it that way.
Yeah, you guys are doing a great job. That's what I see. But I wanted to thank you so much for being on.
I appreciate you asking.